21. Signed. Committee Room 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 30. 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 Committee Room 30. Signed. 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 Committee Room 30, 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 Committee Room 30, signed. 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 Committee Room 30. Sound. Committee Room 30. Sound. Committee Room 30. Sound. Committee Room 30.
Okay, colleagues, good morning and welcome to today's meeting for the Committee for the Economy. I wish to advise members that the committee is in public session and will be recorded and broadcast throughout Parliament buildings and online. Apologies, members, I received one from Kate Nichol. Happy to note we're now joined by Emma Sheeran, Jonathan Buckley and Padraig Delargy online. And in the room we have David Honeyford, Sinead McLaughlin, Diana Armstrong, Gary Middleton and myself. Declarations of interest, members. Does any member wish to declare an interest at this stage? If not, chairperson's business. Item 3.1. Members will recall that the committee met informally with Royal Portrush Golf Club to discuss the impact of the Open, and a summary of the informal meeting has been circulated. Are members content to note that? Thank you. Draft minutes, members, then are at page 7 of our pack, which are reflective of our deliberations on the 30th of April 2025. Are members content that I sign those minutes as a true and accurate reflection? Content. Matters arising, members, are there any issue that members wish to raise at this stage that is not covered later in the agenda? If none, then we'll move to our substantive business. Item 6, Assembly Research, Social Enterprises. The committee will now hear from Assembly Research on social enterprise international best practice, and can I refer members to page 20 of their pack for the research paper, and can I welcome Nathan Mulholland from the Assembly Research Services. Nathan, you're very welcome to committee this morning, and thank you for your important research and piece of work that you provided to the committee. And with that, I'm content to hand over to you, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, committee, and thank you for having me here today. The committee requested a paper seeking international best practice in relation to the concept of social enterprises. Notably, the committee has requested information on Scotland, the Netherlands, United States and Spain. Just before I take the committee through the social enterprise landscape in each of these administrations, I would like to look at some context setting information. So, just in general, a social enterprise is independent business driven by social and environmental purposes. These businesses that reinvest their profits into their mission. There are notable differences identified between a social enterprise and other businesses also operating in what is called the social economy. The European Commission defines the social economy as a wide range of entities with different businesses and organisational models that share the objective of systematically putting people first, producing a positive impact on local communities and pursuing a social and or environmental cause. So the differences between those and a social enterprise are an entrepreneurial outlook, autonomy from the state, they provide services to respond to needs not met by the state or the market, and they generate their own profit to keep themselves running, not relying on donations. I'd also note to the committee that some academic research has considered that there are notable differences between the concept of a social enterprise in Europe and the United States. The difference can be summarised as in the US, social enterprises are more business orientated with an emphasis on revenue raising or revenue generation, while in Europe the perception is they are greater focus on the social benefit they create. The OECD considers these differences and have concluded that social enterprises are defined differently, meaning that there are initiatives that are considered to be a social enterprise in the United States that are not considered to be so in Europe. So I'll now turn to each of the jurisdictions the paper has looked at and consider the social enterprise environment in each. So first, looking at Scotland, there is no specific legislation in relation to social enterprises, but some legislation that is in place and that is currently proposed has been identified which would support the social enterprise landscape in Scotland. However, the Scottish Government do have policy in relation to this sector. Notably, in 2016, the Scottish Government published a social enterprise strategy, 2016 to 2026, so we're still in that period. In addition, the Scottish Government has supported the conducting of a social enterprise census biannually. An analysis of the census results over the years can be found in Appendix 1 of the paper. The Scottish Government has also provided funding to support social enterprises. This includes funding for business support, access to loans, and social entrepreneurs fund. As with other countries the paper considers, representative organisations play a key role in supporting social enterprises in each country. In Scotland, the paper highlights the role played by Social Enterprise Scotland in promoting the social enterprise sector. The paper highlights that the Social Enterprise Scotland has also established a voluntary code of practice for social enterprises in Scotland. So turn to the next section, which considers the Netherlands. The Netherlands has been described as a late bloomer to this concept of social enterprises, but it has been observed that in general many Dutch companies have long adopted social economy and social enterprise principles without naming them. As with Scotland, no national legislation currently exists, but some current legislation that is in place does align and support social enterprises. However, the concept has become a topic of Dutch political discourse with the 2017 coalition agreement, stating that it would stimulate social enterprises with appropriate regulation. Subsequently, in 2021, the Dutch government published a consultation on a proposed legal regulation on a private limited company with a social purpose. This is a very long Dutch word, but BVM is a simpler term in the paper. To date, that legislation has not been brought to the Dutch Parliament, but is expected this year. In terms of strategy, there is no national strategy that could be identified, but at a local city level, a number of strategies and support programs have been identified. In terms of representative organisations, a number have been identified, but I would highlight the work of Social Enterprise NL to the committee, playing a similar role to that described previously in relation to Social Enterprise Scotland. Social Enterprise NL also produce a regular Social Enterprise Monitor report. As in Scotland, a Social Enterprise Code has been established, with those signing up the code being added to a register of social enterprises. And so I'll just move on then to the United States. So where the concept of social enterprise is considered in the United States is considered well established. Where there is no current federal legislation, a number of states have passed legislation which has created a number of distinct legal entities, each with a distinct leadership structure and tax liability. The paper also highlights that the Social Enterprise Alliance, which describes it as the preeminent US-based hub for social enterprise resources and professional development. As I say, the level of detail able to go into, because it's a state level in the United States, was slightly difficult. So I would highlight that to the committee. And also, just going back to the other examples that we've looked at in terms of the Dutch and the Spanish, which I'll come to later, there are certain language barriers there, and to be able to do the research into the fullest detail, just with my lack of Spanish and Dutch. So I just hope that maybe both of this. So finally, the paper considers the social enterprise environment in Spain. The paper notes that the term is contested in Spain in terms of the wider social economy and the cooperative movement that have been well established. However, the modern conceptions would suggest that social enterprises are part of and expand on the social economy. In academic research, a noted example often referred to in this sphere is the Mondragon Cooperative Group in the Basque Country, which is one of the largest companies in Spain today, and they are seen as I can't remember, a gleaming light, perhaps, I think was one of the quotes used in terms of the social enterprise across the world. The Spanish government have legislated in this area in terms of social economy. In 2011, the Spanish Parliament enacted the social economy legislation, which defines and supports those businesses operating in this area. Subsequently, the Spanish government approved in 2023 a new draft comprehensive legislation on social economy and published a Spanish strategy for the social economy. Many of those operating in the social economy are supported by the Spanish Business Confederation of Social Economy, which again represents and supports those businesses and organisations operating in the sector. That's a very brief overview of the case studies that we've identified, and I'll be happy to end there and take any questions the committee have.
Thank you very much indeed. Nathan, if I could just start with the one question. When you were doing this research, were you able to see any differences in terms of government support schemes for the social enterprise sector that aren't currently in place in Northern Ireland, which seem to work?
As I say, in terms of direct government intervention on this, it did seem that Scotland has been a leader in terms of the case studies we've looked at. At a more drop-down level, the work that has happened in the Netherlands at a city level, they have provided a lot of support. They've created hubs for social entrepreneurs to meet and to give them business support and advice. The current landscape in Northern Ireland, I suppose I've come to this slightly just off the line, so I'm not entirely over what is currently happening in Northern Ireland. But as I say, from the example of Scotland, I think you can see a lot there that the creation of a register of businesses that people can easily identify. Now, the problem with those registers identified here are they are voluntary, so therefore there are perhaps other businesses operating in the sphere that may not be on those lists. But that the Netherlands example, it was for people who want to work with social enterprises to be able to easily identify them. I know the Social Enterprise Northern Ireland has one of those lists online, and there. But as I say, without a code of conduct and that sort of independent body accessing them, and again, that because social enterprises is undefined at the minute, until you get a sort of code of practice in place and you're able to clearly have a body reviewing and saying this is a social enterprise, this isn't, because as I say, that wider social economy sphere, there's a lot of grey area between the cooperative movement, the non-profits and stuff like that there. So it's about clearly setting up those rules or the sort of the principles behind it, so that this is a social enterprise, and then taking that forward. And I think that's sort of your starting point, and that's what the paper has kind of identified, is establishing that kind of framework to begin with is where you need to go before you move on to the other maybe support schemes, because it's about knowing who and what a social enterprise actually is. But
And were you able to see during the research any disparity in terms of regions or council areas within Northern Ireland, just given that local economic development's a devolved issue to local councils? We see some councils championing the issues of social enterprises, particularly through their procurement and their support for that sector. Other councils may not do that as much, but maybe that wasn't the subject of your research.
That's what I was about to say. The scope of the paper was the international perspective. Yeah. And again, as I said, I have looked at it briefly. As I said, the first quote on what social enterprise is from Social Enterprise NI, but very much the focus of the paper was the international perspective for the committee to consider in relation to what's happening in Northern Ireland. So
makes sense, 100%. Thank you, Sinead.
Thanks, Nathan. Just in regard to the European plan that has been published, did you gain any sense of how it will impact social enterprises within the South?
That was.
And what can we learn from that?
Yes. Again, that was looked at briefly. It was about establishing that framework across the EU. They've done, as I say, I've quoted the European Commission a lot in this paper, because they've done a lot of work in producing and analysing the sector in each of the countries. The fact sheets that have been identified in here, I'm quite sure there may be one that exists for the Republic of Ireland that may be able to tell more detail. It wasn't a focus I had on terms of looking at the Republic in terms of compiling the paper. But I say that it seemed to be something they are very aware of at a European Commission level, and they are happy to promote it. They have sort of standalone sites on their webpage monitoring this in each country, and so you'll be able to sort of go through that there. So it is something, if we wanted to look at the Republic in particular.
I was just wondering, have they made any changes in order to adapt to the European plan, that came out in 2021? I'm wondering, is there kind of a sense of an alignment across the European Union?
Well, when it comes to the alignment, that was one of the things. Every country that has been looked at here, they seem to interpret, and each country has a different history of how they've got to this stage. Some of these countries have well developed the cooperative movements, and I'm sure that's the case in the Republic with various dairy industries. There's long traditions. Some countries don't have those traditions. Some of the academic research looked at it in terms of how well developed a welfare state was in each country, in terms of then that focus, as I say, that difference in focus between the United States and Europe, that it was the social benefit that was at the heart of it, whereas in the United States it seemed to be more the revenue. One was forward and revenue was back, and the other one was revenue with social impact coming behind. So as I say, it's something I could definitely have a look at in terms of the Republic of Ireland in particular and that development. But as I said, that was more just something I picked up on in relation to the work in the Netherlands and Spain. I didn't have a focus of the Republic at the time, but it's definitely something I could look at further.
Many years ago, I did a visit to the US to visit some social enterprises and relating to my previous role in the Chamber of Commerce, and we looked at some of them in Alabama and around the Boston area. But one of the things that came through was the level of private money that was coming towards the social enterprises. So there was a great philanthropic kind of push for that. So whilst there was government funding, but there also was that social private funding that came through. Did you glean anything from that?
It was something I kind of noticed within the paper, that one of the key, I think, the differences I talked about there was that they are standalone, that they're self-financing, they're maybe going to get loans and stuff. The American example, as you give, there was the idea of it being, there was a lot more private enterprise there. There was a degree in which those examples identified in the American section in terms of the different state level taxable entities, that there was a connection there between them having a role in terms of less tax, and individual, maybe larger companies then doing this as a I can't say the word, but a charitable side to their organisation, and they were using sort of the social enterprise establishment and those kind of legal entities to set that up. And some of the academics research was more explicit that they seen it, but again, it's about perspective on the academic that you're looking at. But they did seem to pick up on a idea that was being used in maybe not so sort of charitable ways, but there was a bit of a tax issue there as well because of the setup. But it's, again, I didn't want to go too far into that because it's not, so I say it's perspective of the particular person who's writing the academic piece of work, and I don't want.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Sinead. David.
The fund, the Scottish fund that they have, it talks about the growth fund. Sorry, I can't remember the name of it. Is there evidence there, or any evidence that's enabled sort of faster growth or more growth, having a dedicated fund to allow that to?
I don't know what analysis they've carried out so far. I suppose the best sort of, maybe it's not the best, but that census tracker can show you sort of the development of the social enterprises in Scotland over time, and they definitely, I think it's Appendix 2 of the paper, shows that there have been more social enterprises, they've been growing. The information seemed from the Scottish Government's website slightly dated now, and so to what level they have carried out further research, I couldn't. And as I say, if you look at some of the dates on that they talked about from 2014 to 2016, I don't know how much further they've taken that. It really, maybe at the end of the strategy period from as I say, it's 2016 to 2026, they might then do a review at the end of that period. They've given themselves 10 years, which is quite a long time for this. So there may be something at the end of that process that might
we can learn from.
Review that to tell us more on that.
Yeah, the other bit, when reading through it, they talk about community empowerment, and that last week we heard from the university about leadership and innovation skills hindering sort of private business. Is that an issue? Has that an issue ever been picked up in specifically in Scotland as the nearest example, where the leadership skills and things like that are for community?
I think that was part of the those other programs that it was that idea of the social entrepreneur, the support for them, that there is that recognition that they need that support to become a leader, to ensure that they have those business skills to drive them forward, but while maintaining that social mission. But I think those other programs that are identified there, that was really what some of those are about, is developing the leadership skills. That a concept of social entrepreneurship as an individual who's taking this forward and then employing people and stuff like that there. So I think that in particular, that particular notion of social entrepreneurship is the key to that leadership question.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thank you very much. Padraig?
Thanks for your presentation and for your questions so far. Look, most of the issues I was going to raise have already been raised, so I kind of don't want to go back over them. But I suppose just for me, the real one was just to see how much the legislative and the department support here actually encouraged the growth of social enterprises, and also then just around productivity. It's obviously one of the key pillars that the minister set out as one of the 4 key priorities. how does this tie in with productivity? Do you see these social enterprises having higher productivity? If so, what drives that?
Back on some of the detail, they're definitely, the social enterprises are definitely smaller companies and I don't know. I know you've got David Jordan coming up later on, and he may be in a better position to talk about that in relation to productivity. It may be something he's covered, but I really, as I said, it wasn't part of the focus of the paper, so I would probably have come across information and can definitely go back and look at some of the stuff that I'd researched that might be able to answer that a bit better. But as I say, the census at the back of the paper, Appendix 2, will show you, I think there is some detail in that in terms of how many people they're employing, how much revenue they're generating is gradually growing over the period since the census started. So that might show something, but I wouldn't want to commit there because it wasn't something that was in my focus when I was doing the paper.
No problem. No, 100% I get that. I think it's just an interesting point because it just reinforces, I suppose, that different model and kind of the potential benefits of it. So I think it is, would be a really, really interesting one to look at, but appreciate that. It was just if the detail was there, but thanks.
Thank you, Patrick. And finally, Diana.
Thank you. Thanks, Nathan, for coming in. Nathan, just one of the figures that jumped out at me from Scotland was the number of social enterprises led by women, 71% in 2021. Is that something you're seeing across the board in your research? And why would that be? Is that the social conscience more stronger, in women, or why is it? Are there any figures? Have you any understanding of why that should be?
I have to say I didn't even notice that when I looked at that there were so many women. It is not something that I've seen elsewhere in the documentation and the academic research, but again, some of it is quite dated now, so there may be an element to that. I'm sorry, I didn't really notice that was the case, but that's a very interesting point, and it's definitely something.
Would that be the same in Northern Ireland? Social enterprises are similarly led by women?
As I said, the scope of the paper has not been Northern Ireland, so I have not done a massive amount on that. But again, as I say, if the committee would want a paper on specific Northern Ireland and Republic, that's something I could happily do. But in terms of the stuff that has been done so far, I haven't really picked up a massive idea about gender related to this area. It wasn't in the academic research. It's not something coming through much on the OECD work either that I'd read. But again, there may be an underlying thing there. As you say, there is maybe perhaps some kind of, I don't know how to put it, but that it does sort of support women and it's. Yeah, you've got me there slightly, sorry, but I hadn't realised that as a point or something. Maybe I would have, if I had picked it up, I would have dug a little bit deeper onto that.
No, that's no problem. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Diana. And can I thank you on behalf of the committee for your really useful presentation, and really appreciate your time and answering members' questions. Thank you very much indeed for that, Nathan.
In terms of an action then,
yes,
Chair, is the committee content to commission Nathan to give us another paper? This one would be about Northern Ireland, the experiences in the different councils, the state of play around social enterprises, sizes, productivity, etc. Comparison with Republic of Ireland, something about EU alignment.
It's just that I just was wondering, based on that action plan, the EU Commission, what does it mean for social enterprises on this island even?
And maybe something on the role of women, if they can come to that. The committee's content, Chairperson, with that?
Yep. There was a piece in the Minister's statement yesterday in relation to the North-South bodies about women entrepreneurship and social enterprise, so it might be worth just having a look at that as well. Members content?
Yep.
Okay, item 7 then, speakers for skills. If I welcome forward our colleagues. Come on ahead, you're very welcome. Very pleased to to welcome colleagues here this morning. Karen Hillis, Head of Engagement, Northern Ireland Speakers for Schools, Nola Ryan, Head of Careers, Belfast Boys Model School, Danielle Keaton, who's Corporate Social Responsibility Manager at Kainos, and of course Anne-Marie Fleming, who'll be well known to members for all the great work that she does with the educational outreach team here at the Assembly. Colleagues, we're delighted to welcome you here, and I'm very happy to hand over to you to make an opening statement.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Chairperson and committee members, for giving us the opportunity to present to you today. I'm here from Speakers for Schools, as already outlined, and I'm joined by partners from education and employer to give their perspectives regarding work experience. One of the most common questions asked of our young people is, what do you want to do when you leave school? It's a question that some will be able to answer very easily and others will struggle to do so. As a parent of 2 teenage boys, it's a question that I equally wrestle with in terms of being able to support and guide my children alongside their educators to make the most informed decisions about whether that's subject choices or post-16, 18 destinations. And for employers, a continual question, particularly as highlighted in the recent Skills Barometer report, is how do you attract new talent and fill skills shortages moving forward? And that's where Speakers for Schools can help. We aim to empower our young people to make informed decisions by providing equal access to fully funded work experience and inspirational talks that can help them answer that all-important what next question. Whether that's by listening to an industry spotlight talk broadcast in Key Stage 3 or participating in multi-day work experience in Key Stage 4 and 5, young people can explore different industries, hear directly from employers about roles that are available both now and in the future, and career pathways, whether that's apprenticeships or degree routes, and what qualifications they may need, as well as developing skills to succeed, both technical and transferable from industry experts to enhance their future career prospects. Work experience isn't a new concept and can conjure up all sorts of memories and perspectives, and perhaps you can think back to maybe work experience that you've had in the past. Unfortunately, it continues to often be secured on a who-you-know basis. So if you're a young person who doesn't have any personal connections with a particular industry or sector that you're interested in, how do you get valuable work experience? Again, Speakers for Schools offers a solution for this by supporting employers to develop and deliver high-impact, high-quality experience to groups of young people aged 14 to 19, either virtually, in person or in a hybrid format. Young people are invited to individually apply to as many opportunities as they wish, regardless of where they live or what school or college that they attend, via our dedicated portal, thereby creating a level playing field for all concerned. Our programmes are quality assured using best practice standards developed internally through significant research with key stakeholders and delivery experience. And we're actually due to launch a full report this in June around what makes high quality work experience impactful. Through our pre and post cert evaluations, we can clearly see the impact of these programmes, and particularly for those students from a lower socio-economic background. So far this academic year alone, we've received over 2,700 individual applications from young people from across 149 different schools, representing 16% of all UK applications received by Speakers for Schools. So we're punching well above our weight in terms of demand. And young people are eager to engage, but sadly demand exceeds supply of spaces and opportunities. But let me pass you to some of my colleagues here to speak about their experiences. Nuala, would you like to start?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Nola Ryan. I'm Head of Careers at the Belfast Boys Model. Just a wee bit of context about the school. Boys Model is located in North Belfast. A current roll of just over 1,100. 52% free school meal entitlement and 13% state-funded. I've worked closely with Speakers for Schools from September 2022, and as an organisation, they've supported us with work experience, mock interviews, and the Careers Convention. Over the last 3 years, Speakers for Schools have facilitated 51 work experience opportunities from 29 different industries for our pupils, including the likes of NI Water, BBC and Kainos. Today I'm going to talk to you about our work experience model that we use in the Boys Model, the challenges that we as educators are presented with, and then some of the benefits that I feel the pupils really get from work experience. At the Boys Model, we offer a hybrid work experience programme for senior pupils in year 13 and 14, which comprises of both virtual work experience and in-person. Virtual work experience is offered all throughout the entire academic year. It is facilitated through the use of MS Teams and Google Classroom. This enables them to develop their digital skills, but it also gives them a valued learning experience in terms of what is commonplace in the workplace post-COVID in terms of using online platforms. The scope of opportunities that Speakers for School have offered is excellent. It's vast and varied from a range of different industries. And new opportunities are available on the virtual platforms each week, which I share with parents and pupils. Then we also offer in-person work experience, and this is for Year 13 pupils, and this takes place in June. I've decided June to accommodate the curriculum and limit the impact on exams. Pupils are required to attend a workplace for 3 days as a minimum. They can go for 5 if they can secure that. And this helps to develop their soft skills in a practical learning environment. Speakers for School have also offered a vast amount of in-person opportunities to align with our dates in June. The challenges that we are faced by educators, and one of the biggest challenges I have, is placements for Year 12 pupils, for the pupils that are choosing to leave school after GCSEs. From collaboration with employers, a lot of employers do not seem to be willing to take pupils at the age of 16. And also with the modular exams spread throughout the year, there isn't really a week in the timetable where we can release the whole year group to go out that won't affect exams. Securing work placements for the 80 to 90 senior pupils that we have in Year 13 is also a challenge. However, with the support of Speakers for School, they have alleviated the pressure, and this year alone they have provided placements for up to 25% of my pupils. The administrative tasks and the paperwork is also it's extensive for both the employer and the school. It's 9 pages per pupil, often 2 to 3 iterations of the paperwork is required before it's complete, and with all the correct certificates and insurance documents in. And also I have had a number of employers that have refused based on the volume of paperwork. They accepted the placement, and when I sent the paperwork, they said, actually, I don't have time. So that is one of the challenges also. Moving on to the benefits of work experience. So employers I've collaborated with, again, have stressed the importance of soft skills and value the experience of the workplace for anybody entering the industry. Work experience gives pupils an advantage when applying for competitive university courses, higher level apprenticeships, and attending interviews. One of my pupils has just secured a higher level apprenticeship with a global law firm. The feedback from his interview was excellent, but one of the main areas they spoke about was the volume of work experience he had completed that was also facilitated by Speakers for Schools. The work experience enabled him to illustrate his passion for the industry, but it also gave him confidence and self-belief when he attended all 5 stages of the interview process, because he was confident in what he was talking about. From my experience, pupils who have completed high quality work experience will make more informed decisions about their future. They have higher aspirations, and they are likely to be more successful when competing for those competitive places. Speakers for Schools have provided a range of opportunities from different industries and engaged in relevant supportive employers for our pupils. These opportunities have been invaluable in building their confidence and exploring their potential, and enabling them to explore their potential. Thank you.
Thank you, Nuala. I could pass to
Yes,
Danielle
sure.
from Kainos.
So good morning everyone, I'm Danielle Keenan, Social Responsibility Manager at Kainos. So we are a technology company and we deliver digital services and workday solutions for public sector, healthcare and commercial organisations globally. So we partnered with Speakers for Schools back in 2021. I think we were the first employer to come on board with Speakers, and we offer a 3-day work experience programme both in our Belfast office and our Derry Londonderry office as well. So we deliver those programmes, and we also offer a virtual edition so that we can open accessibility to young people right across the region. So when young people join our 3-day programme, we of course focus on the technical skills. We provide young people with hands-on practical experience of using software within the industry with a specific focus on programming, on AI and cybersecurity. Alongside the technical training that we provide, we're also preparing young people for the skills of the future that they will need for future jobs. So we look at creative thinking, problem solving, collaboration skills, and really we find that working with Speakers for Schools is a great opportunity for us as an employer to boost social mobility and to promote the career opportunities that are available within the wider software sector. So the programme has been hugely successful for Kainos. It's a great opportunity to attract diverse talent into the software industry. So far we have engaged almost 3,000 young people. Just to point out, that's young people right across the UK, not specifically in NI. Around 42% are NI students. So it's a great opportunity for us, but of course we do have some challenges, and Speakers for Schools really act as the link between education and industry. So it's a really great and valuable partnership for us. So I mentioned some challenges. Our programme is hugely oversubscribed. For every programme that we offer, we receive an average of 40 applications and we can provide 20 places. So it means that an awful lot of young people are unfortunately missing out. We have another issue around gender equality. We find that it's mostly young men that are attracted to work experience in the technology sector. So in response to that, we have provided a women-only work experience programme which sits alongside our inclusion programmes to attract more women. When we look at the software sector, we can see that the workforce is made up of 25% of women, and of course we want to do something about that and encourage more young women to get involved in technology and STEM. We also are facing a skills shortage. So we know that there's disparity in access to computing education within NI. We know that there's 25% of schools that are offering computer science and computing, which are the more technical qualifications that we are specifically interested in. The other challenge that we're facing is the technology advancements. It's very difficult for education to keep pace with industry, and as an employer we want to play our part in helping to develop the next generation of talent and preparing young people for the skills of the future. So that's it for me,
Thank you,
Karen.
Danielle. And last but not least, Anne-Marie.
Thanks, Karen, and thanks everyone for the opportunity to be here. I'm Anne-Marie Fleming. I work in the Northern Ireland Assembly Education Service, and in the main our role is dealing with schools who want to come to the Northern Ireland Assembly to learn work about the Assembly, and we also do online sessions. In the last number of years, we've been aware that we have been reacting to requests for work experience. Mainly this young person has come to the organisation by dint of knowing someone who works here or an MLA, and we wanted to do something a bit more structured and reach out a bit more to young people across the board in all the school sectors. So for that reason, we joined up this year with Speakers for Schools from September 2024. We've been late to the party. And we offered our first session, which was online in December, where we opened up the opportunity for young people to come online for half a day to learn more about the functions of the Assembly through myself, and then meet with Assembly staff in research, in comms, on the clerking side, and they met with the chair of the Education Committee. So that was an online offering. 25 young people took that up from across Northern Ireland. And in June, between the 10th and the 12th of June, we're doing a 3-day in-person opportunity for young people in this building. And again, they'll get the opportunity this time to come along and sit in on committee meetings in the public gallery. They'll meet with MLAs in a one-to-one. They'll meet with staff also in the parties as well, because not the MLA have a whole team behind them, and they'll meet with Assembly staff from the Bill Office, clerking, research and beyond. So again, as has been mentioned by the other speakers here at this table, there's been a big level of interest, about 70 applicants for about 10. At this point, we're offering the opportunity for about 10. This year, I must say, this is a pilot that we're running here in the Assembly Education Service. We might find that we want to do more, but it does seem that work experience is being pushed into the June timetable, and that brings with it its own problems too. So so far it's been a great experience. We've enjoyed it. We've enjoyed the energy of the young people. We learn a lot as well. It allows us to sharpen our tools at this side. So we're looking forward to the June work experience, and indeed we'll be in contact with yourselves to take part in that. So thanks everyone. I'll hand back to you, Karen.
Thank you. As you've heard from Nuala, Danielle and Anne-Marie, the benefits of work experience are there to be realised. For young people, work experience strengthens their confidence, skills and clarity about their future, with 89% of young people indicating that they felt more confident they could achieve their career goals post-placement. For educators, they're provided with a range of fully funded opportunities across a wide range of industries to hopefully appeal to a range of young people's interests that are quality assured and meet all safeguarding requirements. And again, 89% of educators report that work experience left left young people feeling better informed. And finally, for employers, hosting work experience is a strategic move, but it's also, to quote Danielle in previous conversations, is the right thing to do. We need to invest in the next generation to secure a workplace for the future. This in turn will support the Northern Ireland economic vision and skills agenda by aligning education and training with industry demand across the province, helping achieve greater regional balance and growth across key sectors. In summary, there are challenges we face with delivering our vision in Northern Ireland, which are outlined in the briefing paper, and recommendations are contained there on next steps. But through collaboration and co-creation with all key stakeholders, we believe we can find solutions that can work for everyone. In the words of our Chief Executive, Nick Brooke, while talent is spread evenly across the country, opportunity isn't. But we want to change that and are asking for your support to do so. Thank you for listening, and we welcome any questions that you may have.
Thank you all very much indeed for that presentation. Really, really useful. And in particular, Karen, thank you. When I first met you a number of weeks ago, I was keen to share the important work that you do with the committee. If I could just pick up on the collaborative solutions in terms of, you've done really well in terms of signing up 30 employers across Northern Ireland. How do you believe that we can support increasing that number to ensure that there are more options and that there aren't as many disappointed students, clearly given the oversubscription of your service?
As already demonstrated, we have the support of schools and young people, and you're right, the gap in this is that we need more employers to host work experiences so that we can provide greater number of opportunities. Really, we're seeking up any kind of I appreciate you highlighting kind of the importance of work experience through this forum, and really for you to champion work experience in your own capacity, whether it's within this committee, whether it's in relation to your constituencies at a local level, in terms of the conversations you may have, and equally in relation to the 14 to 19 strategy in terms of the implementation of a work experience model, being able to oversee that and encourage that rollout in due course as within the guidelines, and then to be able to access various forums or contacts that you may have, whether it's through, again, your local areas, local chambers, local contacts that you have, been able to work smarter for us in terms of being able to access, whether through industry bodies, and be able to showcase the great work that is happening and best practice that is happening with employers such as KNOS and NI Assembly to demonstrate the positive impact and show the level of support that we can provide to employers to, again, take the hard work out of the aspect, because that is often the fear factor of many employers. We don't have the capacity, we don't have the resource, the time. And again, by showcasing the level of support that we provide right from the beginning in terms of content creation, the delivery, the hosting, the support, the gathering and recruitment of students, we're really doing all the heavy lifting for the employers. It allows them to really focus their efforts on developing high quality content. And again, we've developed a range of best practice guidance, again, which we can share with employers, again, to help them in terms of understanding what it means to deliver a high quality work experience, and again, really minimise any negative potential impact that may have on the employer.
100%. And Edith, firstly, thank you for all you do in North Belfast. I just wanted to pick up on the paperwork part that you raised. So is that a Department for Education requirement?
It's the EA paperwork, so it's a legal requirement because we're an EA maintained school.
Yes.
So that paperwork has to be in place for any EA school.
Yes, and that hasn't been reviewed or streamlined in a long time.
It has.
Right, so 9 pages is
in the last year, yes.
Okay. What did it move from?
It moved from about 12 pages to 9.
Okay.
Yeah.
25%.
You know, I fully understand.
Yes.
Obviously, my priority is the pupil safety, and I understand that, but it is a big barrier whenever you're speaking with employers. You know, as I've had people email me, yes, no problem, send me over the paperwork, and then emails back, no, I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
Now, Speakers for Schools, when they arrange the group sessions like with KNOS and stuff, you manage the paperwork side of it. So when I get it back from you, it's correct. Whereas whenever I'm dealing with individual employers, you know, something mightn't be filled in, the insurance certificate hasn't been attached, or, you know, and it's constant back and forth. And I can't change it because it is a legal document. Yes. So it has to be changed by them, you know, so it's not even they can tell me over the phone. So it's quite time consuming, that, you know, from both elements.
If I could jump in on that, this is one aspect that barriers was we recognise within Speakers to Schools, and so we've actually introduced a document library function within our dedicated portal that's accessible by educators and employers, and that's where we basically upload pre-signed documentation that educators can then access and populate with the student details to try and minimise that administrative burden, that everything is there, the risk assessment is there, the insurance liability is there, the safeguarding policy is there, and all the relevant documentation that they need in order to sign off on any potential in-person work experiences.
100%. And then finally, just for me, Danielle, could you maybe give a wee bit more detail about the women only or girl only programme that you run to try and encourage more young females to get involved?
So it's essentially the same 3-day programme, but the reason that we have introduced this intervention as women only is to try and build up that peer support network within other young women, because essentially we are bringing young women from different schools and we find that, I'm the only person in my school that's interested in this subject. So it's trying to build peer networks and trying to give them some confidence that there is a place in the software industry for women. We also connect them with female role models within KNOS just to show the different career opportunities that are available. So we do have fully inclusive programs, but this is just something that we have trialled and it has been working quite well. Since we introduced the women only program, we have actually seen the number of overall women increase. So which is over the 3,000 people that have engaged, the female representation is 33%. So we are starting to see some slow improvements in the gender balance.
Well, that's great to see. And I spoke at one of your events with Lloyds. I went to visit them, and the young people had given up their half term to spend a week in Belfast. There were people from Londonderry students who had paid to have an Airbnb in Belfast just so that they could take part in the programme because it was so good. Got to enjoy the nightlife of Belfast as well, which might have been a welcome addition for them. But I know, even speaking to the young people right across Northern Ireland who had taken part in it, just how beneficial it was for them. Padraig?
Thank you, and look, thank you all for what was a really interesting presentation. I think it's important just that, this is a consistent part of our work as around careers and around that progression. So I think the work that you're doing is hugely important. For me, really, I suppose the question firstly was around how do you make it more meaningful, because I know like a lot of the young people that, like when I went to school, most people, and I wanted to do primary teaching, so for me I wanted to go into the primary school and kind of learn the ropes really, but for a lot of people that's just the easy option. They just do what's natural and what's easy to get into. So how do you actually make it more meaningful, more relevant, and actually for them to get more out of it?
Thank you for the question. This really comes down to the extensive research that we've participated in. Over the last year, we have actually engaged in a broad range of research with educators, young people and employers. And as mentioned briefly during the opening remarks, we are due to launch a paper in June in terms of what makes good quality work experience. But in terms of, we implement a full quality assurance framework currently for every single placement. So every placement is reviewed against success criteria that are aligned to benchmarks, which again are linked to curriculum. So again, there's that full transparency and consistency with regard to the delivery elements, whether that's making sure that there's conversations about different roles, about different pathways, about technical skills, and making sure that all those elements are built in. And that's where, again, Speakers for Schools staff work very closely with employers to ensure those core elements are included and measured in each placement. Moving forward, we are looking to introduce a new iteration of that framework from September in light of the research paper that will be launched in June. And again, that will be shared publicly, so again anyone can access the information, because we do have a WEX or work experience resource that's available on our website that anybody can access. And again, it's just really about best practice and sharing that learning with everyone, because not everyone will host work experience through us, but if we can encourage other employers to improve the quality of their work experience or include different elements, then that will ultimately benefit the young person and increase the reach of high quality and impactful experiences to young people.
Can I
Thank
also
you.
jump in?
Yeah, it's exactly that. Oh, sorry, come on.
I was going to say from a school point of view as well, it's the pupils being directed into the right placements. So the pupils need to attend placements they're interested in that match their subjects, where they can see a valuable progression route. You know, there's no point in them just going to do work experience for the sake of it, which is probably what I done when I was younger as well. So there's a lot more work being done in schools from that point of view, that, you know, they can see their subjects, they can see what pathways they would have available to them and how they could actually end up in a career like that. So.
And with our particular process within Speak for Schools, we invite individual students to apply for applications. So by the very nature of the individual application, we find that the impact and the engagement is so much higher because they've actually chosen to apply. They want to be there. They have a genuine interest. So in terms of all the ratings and impact reports thereafter, it generally is a very positive trajectory from pre and post in terms of what the skills and the confidence that they gain.
Brilliant. No, thanks very much for that answer. And I suppose the other issue was around the paperwork that you've raised as well. We've done quite a few meetings with employers who have flagged that issue, yes, but they've also flagged around insurance, indemnity and so on as well as a key barrier. So it's to kind of get whether or not you're picking that up as well. My worry would be that obviously we're an SME focused economy, and that you have a lot of people who are going to go into either family business or, as you say, somebody that they know, or who are going to go for a large scale business, and that's fantastic as well. But I'm just worried that, you know, over 90% of our businesses are SMEs, and if you have basically a lot of them who are potentially excluded from that, or who maybe don't have the, you know, the HR capabilities to do those processes and so on, you could be missing out a huge chunk of the workforce and a huge chunk of people there. So it's just to see really, have you picked that up? And I suppose for us as a committee, I mean, I think that's something we need to be raising with ABI and with others as well, the fact that this is something that we're hearing from employers, and how do we actually fix it to make that process less arduous for people who want to take on people for work experience? How do we make that more easy and more streamlined?
As a minimum requirement, we do ask employers to provide employer liability insurance, and so we do ask them to check with the relevant insurance provider in terms of what age group that they can host on site. Probably the other side of this is that we do offer a virtual platform, but that negates the need for all paperwork because there's no associated risk, and that is actually something that we are moving much more towards, particularly as was post-COVID with the workforce patterns now, where more people are working in a hybrid format. 73% of our opportunities this year have been delivered in a virtual format, and again that very much negates the need for the administration and the insurance requirements, if that is the big barrier. In relation to SMEs, again, it's a recognition that we have a high volume of SMEs within Northern Ireland, and they may not have the capacity to host a 3-day work experience, for example. And again, this is where we have sought to work creatively across different SMEs and different industries to collate, bundle, deliver industry-themed 3 days that incorporate a number of different employers, so they each are able to still contribute in some form to that process, while allowing young people to still get an overview and experience of the industry and the employer. And that's worked very positively. We had ran for instance, a youth work 3-day experience with 3 different providers in January, and there's been other opportunities since then where we've been able to bundle different employers together to formulate that extensive work experience.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. And look, I think what you're doing is fantastic. I think it really augments and supports the work that the schools and colleges are doing, which is brilliant, and it's something just totally different. So thanks very much for the presentation. It's been really useful.
Very much.
Thank you, Padraig. Sinead?
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. And work placements are so important for young people, not only about what they want to do in life, but also to find out quickly what they don't want to do.
Yes.
You know, a bad experience sometimes is the best experience for them to change their mind earlier on or seek new opportunities. I was involved in School Employers Connection in Foyle, and they have been doing magnificent work for over 24 years in the greater northwest area, until funding was withdrawn and they had to close down, and they had connections right throughout the region, and we're matching schools and children and doing all the work that you're doing. And I'm just wondering, you know, if that project was a pilot project for 24 years, and it was an innovative project, and it didn't cost an awful lot of money, and yet it was just thrown away like that, and all the value that has. I'm wondering, you know, how do we ensure that organisations like Speakers for Schools are valued and protected, so that they can continue the work that they're doing, and that we don't see withdrawal of funding, and in fact that we see an increase of funding. And I'm also wondering, you know, how this, you know, the Department for the Economy and the Department for Education can actually really do joined up thinking here in funding and supporting organisations. So can you just tell me even a wee bit about your funding and how that manifests and protects the work that you do?
We are a not-for-profit charity, and as such we do not receive any government funding. 90% of our income stream comes from donations, and in particular one particular large donor, the Law Family Foundation over in England. We rely very heavily on donations, and do, I suppose, add to that, we apply for different grants, bids, and any sort of funding opportunities that exist, and if successful, that augments the work that we do. We also have commercial contracts and managed services with the likes of Kainos, for example, that would have a paid service and contribute then to our income stream in that respect. But we are limited by the funding that we have. Everything is a finite number, and obviously we do want to expand, we do want to grow. We've been operational in Northern Ireland only since 21, and that was during COVID. So we're still relatively in our infancy in that respect, but have great aspirations in becoming a regional force and really reaching as many employers across the province as we can. But that does take resource and commitment, and certainly from where there is funding available that we could secure to even pilot initiatives or work on different projects, that obviously secures our position within Northern Ireland.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And in many ways, you know, you're replicating exactly the work of School Employers Connection. Absolutely, you're taking the heavy lifting from the companies. But if you're relying on the private sector, the companies, then you're obviously probably relying on the big companies like Kainos, possibly Allstate, you know, those organisations that can afford to pay you. But as Pádraig said, there are loads of small, medium-sized enterprises that would engage, but probably wouldn't have the money to actually, you know, fund your organisation as well. So there is a disconnect that I think we as a committee need to raise at a higher level with the department, maybe both the Department of Education, because it's unsustainable if you don't get the regional buy-in as well. And can I ask just about the regional breakdown of your schools?
We're registered with 175 of the 192 schools across the province. This year alone we've received nearly 2,700 applications from 149 different schools. So again, we are fully engaged right across the board with all grant-aided schools and further education colleges across the province, and we have an education manager who really goes above and beyond to support educators in terms of day-to-day support with applications or notifications about opportunities, and supporting them really at every step to give their young people the best possible access. But yes, we're open to working, and it very much is a level playing field in that respect, because we don't want any particular school to have priority over another. It's about the quality of the young person.
Excellent. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much indeed, Sinead. David?
Okay, thank you all for coming in. Just picking up a couple of things you said. One of the things you said, you pushed into the June timetable. Yep. Another thing you said is not affecting the academic curriculum. Is that actually the problem? That we're not valuing skills and what our kids, the inspiration to our kids, but we're seeing education as a block, and this is an also add-on, rather than this is fundamental to the kids' future?
Yeah, well, I'm constrained really by my management in school, and you know, but
I don't mean the school. I mean as a system. Yeah. I mean as a whole.
Yeah. Yeah, potentially. Because obviously in school the first and foremost is the subjects, the curriculum and the exams, you know, so you're looking for the most viable time that they can go out with the least disruption.
Sorry, I was just going to say, from the employer perspective, the demand is huge in June, whereas if we could spread that out throughout the academic term, we could manage that a little bit better, and then young people could have more access instead of just being swamped, you know, in the summer term.
And that's the challenge we constantly hear. Majority of schools will release their year 13 students in June, so you have this huge bottleneck in June, the same 2 weeks, where you've got hundreds of students looking for work experience. So every employer in the country is being contacted, can you take my son, daughter, cousin, whatever. And that creates huge strains on the employers, and equally that could be a time of the year where that's not good for their capacity, and actually there's other opportune times within the rest of the year. But then we face the challenge if we host it, and we do offer opportunities throughout the academic year, and we do encourage applications, and we work with across schools and educators to try and match, or as closely as possible, the optimum times, whether that's an autumn term, spring term or summer term, to try and create those opportunities. But it is a challenge, and I think if we could get more flexibility in a system, because we know there have been occasions where schools haven't released students to attend where they've wanted to attend, or for whatever reason, whether that's curriculum delivery or modular assessments. But again, that's the systemic challenge when so much has to be done within a short space of time within schools.
I totally understand where the schools are coming from at the point at now in time, but I've said before, I'm sitting here, I think we're developing our system is geared to develop another generation of civil servants that is not actually for our skills for industry and business, and that's an issue, and it's the value of that within. But if we look at England, have said they're going 2 weeks work experience. The South have gone, or moving towards 2 weeks or more than 2 weeks within their new systems. How are they delivering that? Is that throughout the year, or how is that? Do you have any idea?
Labour government has pledged within their manifesto to offer 2 weeks of work experience to all young people. The detail of that is still being teased out as it's speaks, so we don't have clear detail in terms of how that would be delivered, but that is a commitment, and they have pledged 85 million to put behind that, the delivery of that. In terms of the Republic of Ireland, they have the optional transition year at age 15 between junior and senior years. There is a new transition year programme that's being rolled out from September 25, which careers is a core tenet within that, and there is a suggested recommendation within the programme that I read that suggested a 2 to 4 week work experience to be built in alongside a myriad of other career interventions such as talks, careers advice, and so on. So I can't give you exact detail because that's not available yet, but certainly moves are being made in that direction in terms of that more longer commitment. And what we would certainly advocate for would be earlier intervention and more layered approaches too. You know, for instance, we offer inspirational talks from the age of 11, and that's industry spotlight talks that can just sow the seed and shine a light in different industries that are available 24/7 through our broadcast library and our website. When supplemented with insight days or multi-day experiences from 4th year upwards, that can just allow young people to try different things and, as has been mentioned, work out what they like or don't like. Unfortunately, we would see most of our young people only coming to us in year 13. I think 62% of our applications in year came from 17-year-olds, whereas if we look at the 14, 15, that's closer to 20%. So this is where we are certainly advocates for earlier intervention and have actually ran different initiatives in England, which I'd be keen to explore over here in Northern Ireland, focusing in on year 10 students, even that kind of before GCSE decisions, because if you think about year 13, decisions are made largely, but then they've made their, whether they want to do A-levels, they've gone through their GCSEs, and actually to fully inform and make the right decisions at an earlier stage is so critical before they start going down a path that then is the wrong path for them.
My next question to you was what age, because we actually had a debate in the chamber of the CAO system in the south, and a lot of kids are ruled out of that application because they don't choose a subject for GCSE. So way earlier, and this is exactly the same with somebody working to go towards a career in Kane Australia. If you don't choose the subjects right earlier, then you're limiting choice going forward. So I suppose you said 11 there. I was going to ask you what age should this. I appreciate you can't send an 11-year-old out on work experience, but you can bring the inspiration in and try and inspire within the school and try and give a dream of what somebody could achieve and what they could do. So if we were to go as a committee, we're economy committee, just so we don't leave this and you go and we go, right, wasn't that nice? What can we actually do, or what can we do here? If we were to change something, what would that change be to allow this to inspire a generation coming through and start to see change coming through? What do you feel we can do?
I would like to see the value of work experience recognised within the curriculum, that there is a minimum offer actually laid out that is standardised across all schools. At the moment, there's guidance from Education Authority, but it really is at the discretion of every school to develop their own policy in this area. So there is huge disparity in how each school approaches this and what they do. So again, to have that standardised so that there isn't this inequality between young people attending different schools would be really beneficial. Within the 14 to 19 strategy, there are tasks and actions there in terms of the rollout of a equitable and accessible work experience model. So to be able to see all those actually come to fruition and greater flexibility built into the curriculum to enable young people to be allowed off timetable, for it to be seen as a valued contribution to their education as opposed to something that's bolted on at the end of year 13. I think would be really beneficial, and we've seen the positive impact and the motivation that it also creates for young people if they really hook into something that they develop a passion for and an interest for. That can positively impact their educational studies as well. And if we think about this lower socioeconomic students, we do see the impact of work experience being particularly high for them, and equally there's international research that would indicate earlier intervention is most beneficial, because those of a maybe lower or middle kind of academical achievement will actually gain much more from the practical outworkings of work experience, and able to showcase what potential and inspire them for the future.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Gary?
Thanks, Chair, and thanks to all of you for your presentation. Very useful, and I'm sure I can speak for myself and others, and that we do value work experience. No doubt many of us who have had it recognise the value in it. Just to follow up on David's point, just in terms of subject choice and the importance, I suppose, and Danielle, I think you talked about sort of the skills catch up and maybe that gap between education and schools and employers, and I suppose that's not a slant on schools, because technology is advancing so quickly it's impossible almost for schools to keep up with all of the other challenges that they face. I suppose is how do we go about bridging that gap, and I suppose even in terms of aspirations. So we visited the Deluxe Group not that long ago, who do fantastic work around creative arts and are involved in Universal Studios and designing sets. When I was at school doing GCSE technology and design, I never would have aspired to that because it wasn't even on my radar, in terms of an opportunity. So how do you see as a solution as to try and garner that support and recognise that actually the subjects that you're doing now, whilst they may seem mundane, and the reality is there are opportunities there and a skills gap that we need to fill?
Yeah, I can add from a KNOS perspective. So what students are learning in the classroom is vastly different to what's happening in industry, just around the tools. And, I have to mention AI as well, how it's transforming our skill-based and what we do for our customers and the solutions that we provide. So it's not a criticism of schools or teachers, because they do incredible work, but it's very, very difficult for them to keep pace with what is going on in industry. So it's really important for us to actually bring people along in the journey and demystify the careers, to explain what a software engineer is, what an AI engineer is, what a data scientist is. I think that young people just are not aware of all of the career opportunities, and in 12 months' time there could be different roles again. So it's really important to show them what skills and what technologies are actually needed, and how they can prepare for those future jobs. So I think more of what we're doing, we're actually working with Software NI to create work experience for computing teachers. So in the month of June we're actually bringing teachers from the classroom to industry, and the overall aim of that is that that will increase and improve the student outcomes when it comes to learning about how you solve a problem through software, how you would use AI to create better solutions for customers. So I think we just need to strengthen, and we've got the foundations there, and the schools are very collaborative, teachers are very invested, so I think we need to do more of that to look at what we do with modern technologies and how that can be applied in the classroom. But of course there's lots of restrictions around curriculum, and teachers absolutely have to follow what's in the curriculum. So it's trying to have a blended approach to show real world application and how we can bring that into the classroom.
That's useful. I think that's the importance.
I
Of course, I was just going to say that's the importance, I suppose, of ourselves working closely with our colleagues in the Committee for Education to try and get that blended approach.
Yeah, I think the teacher placements are fantastic. So we focused on that this year, and we've sent about 5 teachers out in the industry. Now, these teachers have never been anywhere but a school. So they literally went to school, went to uni, went back to school. So they came back, and the value that they seen in that was incredible. So they came back and they done a whole staff presentation, and they were thinking about potentially leaving. They were saying it was lovely and quiet, So, but
like ourselves sometimes.
Yeah, but they came back and they really did see the value, and they said they were able to see now exactly what employers are wanting and the skills and how they're now going to try and incorporate that into their schemes of work, into their lessons. Okay, yes, they have to follow the curriculum, but a blended approach of actually combining the two. I think is a no-brainer, and I think, but again, a challenge of that is teacher day release. So it's fine in June whenever the exams are on and we're a bit later on our timetables, but definitely worthwhile.
No, thanks for that. And Nuala, I suppose from yourself and your own perspective with the school, the hybrid versus the in-person, and I know obviously there's the hybrid by its nature is obviously blended, and you've in-person and you've online. In terms of the feedback, and I suppose it's difficult if you haven't known any difference. So when I done my work placement, there was no obviously hybrid option. You were there and that was it. In terms of feedback, in terms of the quality of those placements, and I can understand and I commend Kainos for the work that they do, and particularly around women and trying to, I suppose, garner that interest across our community. But in terms of, I suppose, feedback, in terms of the quality of the placement, it suits maybe a computing sector, but are there other sectors where actually it may diminish the experience if it's not in person?
I think there's lots of factors to consider there. I think it also depends on the pupil. It depends on the sort of how sociable and how willing they are to engage, because, it could just be a pupil sitting at a screen doing nothing. Okay, so when I'm choosing pupils or allocating their work experience or writing their references, I'll explain to them exactly what's expected of them, so you will be expected to, raise your hand on the screen and ask your questions and engage. And that doesn't suit some. Some prefer to be somewhere very sociable, some prefer to be in an actual physical workplace. But any of the pupils that have done the virtual work experience, particularly IT, that is the main one that our boys would do. They have enjoyed it because they've got the hands-on experience of the programme and using the different languages, cybersecurity. So I think, from my point of view, IT is definitely, it's very beneficial that way, but it depends on the pupil as well.
Just from an employer perspective, we deliver virtual and in person, but it is the same content. They are following the same program, so they will get an onboarding to the company like we would an employee. They go through the same activities, they learn, they do the same projects, they build a website, and then they work in teams. So essentially it is the same program, but obviously it's a different environment, and when we bring them into our office, they get to see our working environment, experience our culture, they get to meet different people. But we do our best to try and make it a great experience when it is virtual, so that it means that young people in our rural communities can access them, and they're not worried about travelling to the northwest or Belfast. So for us, we don't have any plans to drop our virtual. We will continue that because it enhances accessibility right across the region, and we still see value. And the young people that attend that programme also say that their technical skills have increased and that they're more aware of the career opportunities. So for us, it is working extremely well, and we will continue with both models.
And just a final question from me. In terms of data of numbers of students not getting placements, do we know, and obviously in terms of, I'm sure you maybe can't answer for the whole of Northern Ireland, every specific school, but is there any evidence as to how many students are going without placements, and are there particular sectors where there are particular challenges? We've obviously mentioned the administrative burden, and again there's a bit of work to be done in terms of is it just the fear factor of just seeing the form and just being afraid in terms of, my goodness, this is a minefield, and obviously the time capacity issue, but in terms of feedback from those employers who actually, like Kainos is a good example, and for that matter the Assembly. And Anne-Marie, sorry, we haven't many questions for you because we're
okay.
But I suppose you're good examples of that, so that I suppose that's the benefit of, you've been through it, you know what it's like, and the work that you do obviously through Speakers for Schools, it helps that. But is there data in particular sectors where a piece of work can be done to try and encourage them to come forward, I suppose, and offer those placements?
We don't actually have a data set on the number of young people who access work experience. Speaking to Nuala, it is recorded at a local school level, yes, but it isn't reported anywhere. So to the best of my knowledge, there's no reference or number of the number of young people who access or can't access work experience. And I suppose the challenge with that also is that quite often young people will default to go into a work experience that they're not interested in, just to tick that brief as well, whether it's back to the rural primary school. So whether that's a qualitative measurement as well that you want to include as well, might skew it slightly. But in terms of in the briefing notes that we sent, there was a survey that was sent out UK-wide by YouGov, commissioned by Speakers for Schools, which included Northern Ireland within that, and 66% of young people reported leaving school without work experience. But again, we can't quantify it exactly for Northern Ireland because that data set, to the best of our knowledge, isn't available.
The area I would say that I find the biggest challenge getting the placement is the health sector. So there's any aspiring medics, it's a bit virtually impossible to get them in for work experience.
And is that because of purely the administration and the change in terms of the education requirements, or is that because of just capacity? And the fact is that, because even in terms of our own rule changes, like when we have people in our offices, insurances, GDPR, things, there's all of these issues that almost it prevents us from having a meaningful. We can have somebody there to sit there and watch, but it's not very exciting or entertaining for that matter. So
I think it could be a combination of both. They did offer work experience before COVID, but from COVID, now there was a company, Work Inspiration, that used to be able to maybe get me one placement a year, but if I had 3 pupils wanting to go for medicine, it's hard. I actually drew straws one year because it was how is it fair, so that's the one challenge I would have.
Healthcare has been raised with us as well, and we have reached out to the different health trusts to participate. Now, we did previously work with the Western Health and Social Care Trust, but they took all of their placements internally and are managing that centrally. The other trust, one has engaged with us, and we're hopeful of being able to maybe do something in the future, but those are slow progress. In terms of health, we also, again, being UK-wide charity, we do have virtual opportunities that young people in Northern Ireland can access in GP, and we have had NHS-related placements, and we actually are offering we've linked in with allied health professionals actually for this June, where we're running a art and music therapy session virtually for young people as well. So we're trying again think creatively to get around these barriers, and even trying to link in with relevant professionals who can volunteer their time in some capacity to be able to host, and then we can help support them with the delivery and development of the content. But very much we really want to diversify and provide an offering across all industries to suit all young people's interests. Not everybody wants to go into tech or law or medicine. So it is really about trying to offer a full range of options that hopefully, again, will engage and inspire them to follow that path.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. And finally, Diana.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you to the panel this morning. It was really interesting. Certainly see the value of work experience, and I wish it could be more available, at an earlier age, but obviously understand the reasons why not. I just wanted to look, you mentioned regional balance in rural schools, and just how it works, how you see the opportunities being available for the pupils who have further to go to find a workplace experience that really meets their aspirations. I'm thinking even of young students wanting to go to NI Screen, companies like that. You mentioned Deluxe.
Yeah.
You know, those are very specific industries, niche industries, and for pupils wishing to get their work experience there are more barriers. If you're living, say, in Enniskillen, if you're in Belcoo, Newton Butler, you know, how can that be addressed?
Again, that's where virtual really comes into its own in that respect, and that's where a large number of opportunities are delivered virtually. If we look at actually the engagement across the council areas, our three largest, highest engaged council areas are actually Causeway Coast and Glens, Mid Ulster and Belfast, closely followed by Derry and Strabane. So there is a demand. We have engagement right across the province from all schools and all council areas, and again, that's something we do want to develop. We are continually amazed, even by in-person experiences, for the right experience, how far a young person will travel. We've seen them travel from Belfast to Derry, from Armagh to Belfast, you know, from Omagh. So if they're able and if they're interested, they often will travel. And again, it's about... But the virtual also allows young people, regardless, as I say, of where they live or what school they go to or what barriers they may face or economic barriers they may have with travelling, to be able to still access opportunities. And so that's how, I suppose that's a major plus in terms of our provision, is that that really helps the accessibility for young people right across to be able to avail. And equally, they can also access opportunities with GB companies virtually as well. And we've seen nearly 800 applications to opportunities there that perhaps aren't available in Northern Ireland but are available in GB, which again they can access. So again, it's just being able to open their eyes to a broader range of industries and employers. And we do work with a range from creative arts and media to finance to technology to hospitality and tourism to sport and leisure. So again, it is about really trying to, again, have something for everyone and appeal to all those industry types to be able to host something either virtually or in person.
Thank you, Diana. And on behalf of the committee, can I thank you for your presentation? Next week, ourselves and the Committee for Education are meeting concurrently to discuss how we can collectively work together to move this forward, because I think it's both a challenge for the Department for Education and for the Department for the Economy. But from my perspective, thank you to the important work that you do, and encourage those MLAs who either don't offer university or student placements to do it. When you were in visiting me, I had one of the young people with me. It's something I always try and encourage them to do if they can stick me for a week. So thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Are members content we take a short adjournment before we have our meeting with Dr. Jordan? Members content then that we go into closed session just for a few moments? Thanks.
Committee Room 30, sound. 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 Committee Room 30. 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 Sound. Committee Room 30.
Okay, colleagues, when we move to item 8, if we could invite Dr. Jordan into the room. Dr. Jordan will provide an overview of Queen's University's recent report. Yep. On behalf of the committee, can I welcome back Dr. David Jordan from Queen's University Business School. Members will be aware that Dr. Jordan is one of the Minister's critical friends, providing expert advice in relation to the issue of productivity. The University Business School has recently produced a report that Dr. Jordan is kindly going to give the committee an overview of. So Dr. Jordan, I'm happy to hand over to you at this stage, sir, and thank you very much for coming along today.
Thank you very much for the invitation today to give you hopefully a brief overview of our recent report, and then happy to take any questions about it and obviously productivity in general as well. So in January this year we published a new report, NI Productivity 2040, and really with this report we're trying to think about how does Northern Ireland close its productivity gap from a policy perspective specifically. So what policies does government need to introduce to close that gap? And this is with obviously the background Northern Ireland has had a persistent productivity gap to the UK and to the Republic of Ireland. And our previous work has looked at the reasons for that. So our original 2021 report looked at the specific reasons why that gap has persisted and exists for Northern Ireland. And we looked at some of the specifics to do with management and leadership practices in our 2023 report. And since 2021, we've been publishing a productivity dashboard for Northern Ireland as well, looking at the productivity drivers. But this report is very much around a roadmap for policy, so what policy needs to do. And the motivation is particularly the fact that improving productivity has been a long-held aspiration of policy, yet we still see the productivity gap persisting. So it suggests that there's something around the implementation of policy that isn't being as effective as we'd want. And one of the past criticisms of policy to try and improve productivity has been around silos in policy. So whenever there's a particular policy intervention, it has been introduced by itself and hasn't particularly taken into the context it's operating within to do with other policies. So our main motivation was to think, okay, productivity, it affects a lot of different areas of the economy, but it's driven by a lot of different factors as well. How do we create this roadmap, this framework for policy to work within? So our report looks firstly at the main challenges that Northern Ireland's economy faces in relation to improving productivity. And then we look at how these link together and then how these link to government departments and delivery partners to think how can we implement policies to improve productivity. And the framework we're working within is what we introduced with our productivity dashboard. So that's to try and think about the key actors within the economy. So thinking about businesses, thinking about individuals in the workforce, government and policy, but then also about individuals within society and businesses and their wider business environment that they operate within. So those are the 5 key areas that we use as our framework to try and identify what the policy challenges are, but then how they interrelate between each other. And so from this, we identify 18 policy challenges and also their links between them. So this is thinking about if you have a particular policy challenge, what might be its precondition? So what might need to be done first to allow us to effectively address a problem? What addressing a certain challenge might do to help address other challenges? So maybe it facilitates improving a certain area to do with productivity as well. And also synergies between different policy challenges. So if you introduce policies in that area and another area, that they work together to make policy the most effective it can be. I'm not going to give you a sort of rundown of every single detail to do with those policy challenges, but we split them across the main areas to do business performance, skills and training, policy and institutions, health and well-being, and investment, infrastructure and connectivity. And then within each of those, we identify what we think are the key policy challenges for policy. And we identify those through using the 7 capitals framework that the Productivity Institute has developed. So looking at what you need as drivers of productivity and using that to identify where does Northern Ireland lag behind other regions of the UK, where does it lag behind potentially the Republic of Ireland as well, and thinking therefore what areas does policy need to focus on. So an example would be within business performance. We identified export intensity. So we have relatively low export intensity given the size of our private sector. Innovation and research and development. So we tend to lag behind on measures of innovation and research and development. Access to external finance. So firms here have good awareness of where they might access finance, but they still find finance to be an obstacle to running their business. And entrepreneurship, so the development of new businesses and new business births. So we do that for each of our 5 areas. And then we look at the policy interactions between those challenges. So to understand, okay, we may have this issue around export intensity, but actually amongst our other challenges, what might we need to address first to help support businesses export more? So that, for example, could be around training to do with skills, it could be to do with access to finance as well, or it could be to do with innovation. And through that process, we identify that there are 6 policy challenges that facilitate 5 or more other policy challenges. So there are key areas that we need to address quite early on if we want to try and improve other areas that we have challenges in. There are 10 policy challenges that have at least 5 preconditions. So that demonstrates there are a lot of areas that have other challenges that need to be addressed first before we can effectively address certain challenges we have. An interesting sort of aspect that comes out from that analysis is if you look at export intensity, if you look at innovation, or you look at entrepreneurship, those have all been key policy priorities over the past 10, 15 years, but they have some of the most number of preconditions. So that gives you an indication maybe why we haven't been fully successful in improving Northern Ireland's performance relative, particularly to other regions in Great Britain. And we also have 4 policy challenges that have 3 or more synergies. So that means if you're trying to address these areas, particularly when you're thinking about policies being introduced across the Northern Ireland Executive, it requires quite close working whenever those policies are being designed and implemented. So that demonstrates the need to try and break down the potential for silos in policy. Given those interconnections and given sort of the identification that one of the issues we've had is this productivity gap is quite deeply embedded in the economy, it will take time to try and reduce and close that gap. We have to think about how can policy do this over the long term. And given these interrelations between different policy challenges, what we recommend is some form of productivity and growth board to be introduced. So this is actually quite common internationally. So it's quite common in the European Union. The Republic of Ireland have a National Competitiveness and Productivity Board. Australia has a Productivity Commission. And it's there really to provide 3 main benefits. So it helps government to try and design policies to meet long-term objectives. So we know particularly in our current world, there's a lot of uncertainty being introduced, and even in the short term, we don't have much certainty. But one of the things that an external body can do is it can take a much longer term horizon and suggest strategically what policy needs to do over a much longer time horizon. It can also aid joined up policy making. So to try and break down those silos in policy, it can help coordinate across both policy, across departments to do with policy, but also across delivery partners and other stakeholders as well. And crucially, it has a very important role to do with monitoring productivity. So having analytical independence to go and analyse what are the key issues around productivity and to go into more detail around some of the productivity drivers that we have and really understand what are the challenges that specifically Northern Ireland face. Because with policy, we know that there's an increasing move towards place-based policy. So trying to ensure policy is designed to reflect the place where it's being implemented. And while we've been working on this for a few years, the Northern Ireland Productivity Forum is not something that will exist forever. And so it's important to sort of have that body there to provide that sort of independent analysis as well. So I'd conclude with sort of 3 takeaways from our report that we think are important for policymakers to consider. So firstly, low productivity is very deeply embedded in our economy, but there's no single cause. So that means if we're thinking about policy, there's not going to be a single policy solution that improves productivity. It's going to have to be coordinated across different policy areas. It's also a very long-standing problem with low productivity, and therefore policy interventions do require commitment and funding over time. So that's been one of the challenges for the Northern Ireland Executive, having single-year budgets. So if we want to try and improve productivity, we have to think about how do we support interventions over a longer time horizon and sequencing those policy interventions to maximise their effectiveness as well. And we think, therefore, a productivity and growth board can help overcome some of these difficulties, but it needs to be part of a wider package of measures. So simply having a body, a productivity and growth board by itself is not going to improve Northern Ireland's productivity automatically. It has to be part of a wider policy agenda around productivity overall. So that's my overview of our report, and very happy to answer any questions about it.
Thank you very much indeed for that. I just wanted to pick up one within the report and then just a wider issue. Just in relation to the report, page 4 of your written evidence just talks about Northern Ireland has a low rate of FDI in comparison to the rest of the UK. How do you quantify that, given that both the Department for the Economy and Invest NI, that's not what they say?
So we look at it in a specific measure that we've designed to try and understand this in context across other regions of the UK. So we use Office for National Statistics numbers which relate to the amount of inward foreign direct investment Northern Ireland receives, but we make it proportionate to the number of jobs in the economy. So we're thinking about how much FDI is Northern Ireland bringing in relative to the size of its economy.
Okay.
Which is going to be slightly different. Obviously, there are trade-offs with that measure because we have a relatively larger public sector. But it means we want to think about what we might aspire to Northern Ireland's economy looking like with investment, particularly because we want to bring in investment to grow our private sector. Therefore, where does Northern Ireland stand?
Okay. And have you tracked that over a period of time?
Yes, so in our dashboard, we've looked at that over time. And from memory, we haven't seen a strong improvement. I can't remember the exact position that we're in, but from memory, I think over the long term, we haven't seen a strong improvement. So it remains a challenge, and that's despite there is both a policy priority around it and there is good work on trying to improve it, but yet Northern Ireland on that measure still lags behind other regions of the UK.
When the Windsor framework was introduced and we were the so-called Singapore of the UK and dual market access was being told by some members of this committee that we were going to get massive investment, you haven't seen that spike?
Not from the data we have at this moment in time, no.
No problem at all. Secondly, just then in relation to your important work as the Minister's critical friend, so in terms of regional balance, we've seen the previous Minister come forward as one of their 4 pillars with the sub-regional economic plan. In relation to good jobs, the Minister gave a policy intent last week in terms of what she would like to see included in a good jobs bill. Since your appointment last February, what have you witnessed the department do in terms of productivity? So those other 2 are quite tangible and can be seen, but in terms of productivity, can you point to anything that the department's done?
I think one of the important aspects has been the department working productivity much more strongly into the policy aspect of the department's work. So it's been rearranging its work and its policy groups around the priority of productivity. And therefore, I think that's been helpful to think about how policy interventions will link up and address that issue of productivity. You're right, there isn't any specific sort of tangible thing in terms of legislation in the same way. But I've been pleased that there's been a welcoming and recognition of the importance of productivity. But as well, particularly thinking of the example of Invest NI, it has been working the issue of productivity much more strongly into how it potentially supports business, particularly following the independent review of Invest NI. So there's actually a tangible aspect with that in terms of how they're assessing applications and they're going through a process of introducing a productivity tool. And I'm aware that the department itself does have a number of perhaps smaller scale policy interventions that are addressing issues, for example, like apprenticeships or supporting SMEs, which are trying to get at some of the issues that they face, the barriers to productivity growth they face. But I would say at this stage, the department is still undergoing trying to focus on productivity, how it best directs policy itself.
And given that the productivity gap is one of the biggest underlying drags on our economy, what further interventions and quick interventions in terms of policy decision making would you like to see the Minister make?
At this stage, in terms of short-term interventions, there's nothing I would particularly pull out as something that hasn't happened, but I'm keen to see that there's a framework for the medium to long term about how productivity is addressed, and particularly going beyond the current executive mandate.
Yeah.
I think the worst thing that could happen is that productivity is a priority now, but then maybe falls off the agenda.
Yeah.
And so there's nothing specific I would point to that I would like to see and hasn't happened. But a key thing for me would be that continual improvement process of policy and evaluating the current things that have been introduced and understand what has been effective, what has not been effective, and being honest about that, which I think the Department is, and therefore working to improve policy over the medium to long term.
Thank you so much. Padraig?
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Dr. Jordan, for your responses and your presentation. I think it's really useful. And Chair, I should just declare an interest, just as a former graduate of that school in Queen's, so just declare an interest in that. So look, I think one of the big things for me is we look at all these issues sometimes in silos, and we're all guilty of doing it. And I think one of the really interesting things that you've done in this report is actually you've looked at those cross-cutting issues and tackled them head on, and actually looking at how they interface with each other. And I think that's something that has been missing and something that's critical if we're to get to those medium and longer term solutions that you've suggested. I just have two questions really. My first one was around the measurements which we'd used, so around GVA versus GDP. And basically, and you're obviously much more aware of this than I am, but in terms of how Invest previously used a different measurement in the past compared with the department, how does that how do we do that going forward to ensure that the data we're looking at isn't different and that we're actually comparing like for like? Because I suppose with anything, I would be worried that we're looking at data and comparing apples and oranges and not getting the full kind of readout of that. And my second question is around research and development. It's obviously key to productivity. Do you have any concerns or any work that you feel the department need to be doing more so around how R&D is actually delivered? So one of the things that had been raised with me by a number of companies was that they felt that just with the fact we are so heavily SME focused, that they maybe didn't have the same access as larger companies had, and that therefore kind of reserved, I suppose, a greater deal of R&D for a smaller number of companies, and therefore could be less impactful to productivity. So look, it's just to get a generic sort of sense on both those issues from yourself and on if there's any work as committee or through the department we need to do on that. Thanks.
Thank you very much for those questions. Yes, so around measurement, it can be one of the more difficult issues at times to fully understand, particularly whenever figures are published. There are choices that often have to be made with these as to what you're focusing on. So traditionally, GVA would be used for regional analysis. Now, obviously, we now do have GDP figures for Northern Ireland more recently. There will be slight differences between those, so I do think it's important that whenever you are making comparisons, that the same measure is used underneath those. And therefore, I'd recognise the issue that if you have different conclusions being drawn from different measures, you could end up with contradictory conclusions potentially. So I would tend towards saying that it's about consistency rather than saying there's one particular measure, this should be what we use. And it's particularly important whenever we compare to the Republic of Ireland as well, that given the issues around GDP, that is potentially a measure that causes issues, particularly on a regional level across the island. Because if we want to think about how Northern Ireland compares to other regions in Ireland, then we have to think, okay, what measures are best to reflect that? So I wouldn't say there's one main measure that's best, but I do think it's important to recognise you can end up with different conclusions based on them. And the other side of that with productivity particularly is the issue around how do you measure the amount of work that's being put in. So if we think about the number of jobs can be different from a per worker measure, because someone might have 2 jobs. And also you have part-time employees. And you can also have issues around hours worked as well, and that comes from the labour force survey. So because you're bringing together different measures, it's important to have that consistency. And there was some work by Paul McFlynn of the Nevin Institute last year with a report published comparing Northern Ireland at a sectoral level compared to GB and compared to the Republic of Ireland, and showing that depending on which measure you use, you get slightly different conclusions. So I think you're right, it's very important to understand what's being used overall. On the second question around research and development, it is incredibly important for our economy here. Northern Ireland doesn't perform too badly if you just take a high level figure for sort of the intensity of research and development investment here, if you measure it relative to the size of the economy. However, there is evidence to suggest that tends to be concentrated in larger firms particularly. So I think you're right, there is a potential issue around smaller firms, how do they best access support around research and development, and as well, whenever they're maybe interacting in supply chains, how can they benefit from R&D investment that maybe larger firms are making as well. So I think that is an important aspect, how particularly those at the lower, smaller end of firm size are supported. And I know the department is trying to encourage greater applications to funding that's available from the UK government through the Innovate programme. But I definitely recognise that that's something that should be looked at.
Oh, sorry, you're on mute, Padraig. 1 sec. We just need broadcasting to turn you back on. Hold on.
Sorry, it wasn't letting me unmute myself.
There you go, actually, yeah, perfect.
You hear me okay, Chair? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. Look, thanks very much for that. And I just kind of want to probe the second point a wee bit. Is there anything else, I suppose, outside of what's already been laid out policy-wise that we can do to encourage that? Because it has been like a consistent issue, that's been raised around that. So is there anything that we can be doing, is it providing more support for SMEs? Is it making the process more straightforward? What does that look like in terms of actually kind of changing that or shifting the dial around R&D and how businesses access that?
I think in the short term, having awareness of the routes available for smaller businesses, I think that would be important, because with a lot of these issues, sometimes there are programs that could be accessed, and it's simply awareness, or it may be lack of time as well, to give that opportunity to apply. So in the short term, that would be the key thing, I think, to focus on. In the medium to long term, I think we probably do need better data around this. So whenever we've done our reports, yes, we can say something about R&D overall in our economy, but we don't get the kind of detail that maybe we'd like to understand. How does this affect different business sizes? So I would probably say understanding the issue better might be needed first before you'd have a further policy intervention.
Oh, it's okay. I think he's finished anyway. Sinead?
Thank you very much, Dr. Jordan, for your paper. It's really fascinating. It's really complex, and I suppose that's probably why we failed to kind of tackle it in a kind of joined up approach. So, in terms of the Productivity and Growth Board, what has your feedback been from the department on that?
So the department, firstly, they welcomed the report and what we've been looking at. I think from the department's point of view, and given that we're focusing on the cross-cutting nature of productivity, I think the department hasn't seen this as something that they would be implementing. So I think this is very much something that's wider. So I think they, with their focus on productivity, are thinking about what can we implement now in terms of policy interventions. They have recognised that probably there does need to be, or they recognise the value of having some kind of independent analysis around productivity specifically, and having that independent analytical capacity, because it does create that sort of transparency around the issue. But I'm not aware of the department proceeding with anything that they would be doing with that at the moment.
Right, and would you have any concerns at all about such a board being set up that maybe felt too far away from the departments, and you know, we're setting up maybe another level of bureaucracy that can be blamed for lack of closing the gap, as opposed to being part of the solution and ownership by government.
I think that would be a potential concern if it's not done well, so if it's not designed and implemented well. There is a lot of evidence, and there's very good papers by the OECD looking at the different models that have been used around these and what works. And there is a clear sort of way that these can be implemented to avoid them becoming simply another level of bureaucracy. I think that would be the worst thing that could happen. I think it would be better not to have this than to have a badly designed productivity and growth board. So I think it would need to be designed in a way that it does bring together the key departments and delivery partners, and it would have that coordination role. I think that's one of the key things. It wouldn't be taking on independent responsibility for implementing policy. It's there to facilitate instead and to create that transparency and coordination.
Okay, just if we can talk a wee bit about skills and training, and I suppose the brain drain that we experience at a very high level here. So 10% of students for undergraduate programmes in the Republic of Ireland study offshore, but 30% here do so, and that creates a problem in itself in terms of productivity at every level. And the provision of higher education is double in the Republic of Ireland in ratio terms than it is here. How significant is it that we close that gap, and how can we do it in you know, with urgency, I suppose, rather than the piecemeal. I mean, it's always incredulous to me about, you know, the Mazen policy that we have here. It's not about even creating new policies. So how do we roll back in existing policies in order to deliver?
Yeah, so I think it's very important for our economy that we have those who can access higher education, hopefully here. I wouldn't say it's a disadvantage if they go away, but if they come back, that's a good thing. But we have had difficulty sort of attracting people back and sort of retaining that talent. We also have, I think, a difficulty attracting in, particularly undergraduate level, those to do degrees in Northern Ireland compared to other, particularly GB regions, who are more effective than we are bringing in that flow. But it is a fundamental driver of the productivity potential of our economy. Now, if you had a much higher level of higher education qualification in our economy, it wouldn't alone lead to higher productivity. So there's a piece of work by Esri a couple of years ago that looked at the comparison between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, and they showed that Northern Ireland is not benefiting from the level of higher educated graduates that we have in the same way. So we're not quite making use of those that we have, and we would like also to have more. And that suggests there's something there, we're not making use of that resource. But I think as well it needs to be taken in the context of the skill level of the overall workforce, and particularly the role of further education as well. Because I think particularly if we talk about regional balance, it's going to be the further education colleges as well that have a really important role to play. And having that balance between further education, higher education, and across Northern Ireland is very important. So I think there are issues, for example, Mazen Cap, where there's something we could do that would be an incremental step to improving things. But I think we have to take quite a broad perspective on how do we improve qualifications for the benefit of the whole of Northern Ireland as well.
And you did mention regional balance. It wasn't me that mentioned it.
I mentioned it too.
So what are the current spatial interventions that you would point to as particularly effective or ineffective, given the regional disparities, which are quite immense, really, in such a small place as Northern Ireland?
So I think at the moment, I think there's good work being done about trying to understand what the barriers that businesses face across Northern Ireland, because I think it's important to recognise that not all businesses across Northern Ireland are going to face the same barriers. They're going to, a lot of them are going to be very similar, whether it be around skills, for example, but understanding what could be done in a particular council area, for example, to support productivity growth. And research we did a couple of years ago using data from NISR showed actually Northern Ireland's council areas are quite diverse in both productivity, but potentially how the resources they have in terms of labour and capital are being used. So I think the work that the department's doing with the local economic partnerships to understand what the issues are, and for local areas to think about what policies would support them, is probably the most important thing at this stage. I think it's very welcome that Invest in I have put a focus on understanding and having people to talk to those people in those regional areas, because I think without understanding what the barriers are, you could introduce a policy that maybe helps some businesses but doesn't have that regional help to it.
Thanks, Sinead. David?
Thank you. Thanks for coming in, David. I read through your report and then went to the 2001 report, and they were basically the same. And no, so it was 2001, 25 years ago, we said this. And the strategy for 2010, the thing that scares me is you've just said we need more research before we can recommend policy change. That terrifies the life out of me. We need to get on with making the change. So how can the same things are coming up? We've had 2 people in this morning, one on careers advice, that was in the report 25 years ago. The social enterprise, and it was in the report 25 years ago. And all of this is already there. So why haven't we got on with it?
So a couple of issues, and are the reasons for that. So one of them, I think, focusing on the research aspect, the reason I suggest that we need more research to understand the issues is not so much to understand that we have the issues, it's to understand what's the most effective way to address them. So what we have in terms of data, for example, often gives us quite a high level understanding. So we say, okay, this R&D, for example, is the problem. But to have a policy intervention, you need to understand which firms are the most that are affected by this issue. And that's one of the issues we have with the data, is trying to drill down to understand what the effective policy interventions we can make. And I would suggest that's potentially one of the reasons why we haven't seen effective policy over the past 25 years, is we knew there are certain issues that are a problem, but to have effective policy intervention, we need to better understand what we're trying to solve with those interventions and to evaluate them afterwards as well. The other issue I would suggest, for the fact, yes, these issues come up, policymakers here were talking about productivity in the 1950s and before, but we tend to have quite a short-term perspective from policy here overall. It is connected to political instability here. I don't think we can deny the fact that if you don't have a government running, then some policy strategies just become strategies that were designed and never implemented and then get replaced again. So I think we don't have a long-term consistency in implementation and evaluation. And unless you close that loop of implementation, evaluation, and then designing better policies, we just end up stuck in this holding pattern with the productivity gap remaining where it is.
Okay. I understand, totally agree with you on the collapse in the Assembly and that, but on a very practical, I suppose I come from a different place than research and academia, but on a very practical level, that report 25 years ago identified that the South was growing at a massive rate and we weren't. Did the South wait around to do all the academic reports on what was happening, or did they just get on with what works? You know what I mean? Did they not implement stuff, or did they research until they got to a point where they understood to them? I don't understand how that works.
So from my understanding of what policy that was implemented in the South, they did do a lot of work to understand what do we need to do to make things better, because they went through a period of time from the 1950s to the start of the 1980s where policy was not making the difference that they wanted, and therefore they did try to understand. The reason, I suppose, doing this report, one of the things we focused on, which hasn't been done before, is this interaction between policies. And we want to emphasise the fact that unless you address those interconnections, we are simply going to have a repeat of 25 years' time. There'll be a report saying, well, we haven't improved productivity here. So my argument and the argument we're making in the report is that we want to try and understand what do we need to do to have effective policy interventions.
So right at this point in time, can you give us 3 things that we should do to implement change?
Well, one of them is the Productivity and Growth Board, but as well, we'd like to see better, not so much diagnosis of the problems, but diagnosis of what the policy interventions need to be in a long-term framework. So we want to have that long-term roadmap, which we are sort of trying to give the foundation to. And as well, we think it's important that we have that interaction between departments. That unless we have departments breaking down those silos, again, we're not going to see an improvement over time.
Just a quick one, just on the board. If we haven't implemented anything, what's the point of a board looking at stuff that we haven't done?
It's there to give transparency. So it's there to...
We can see from 2001 we haven't done anything. Like, I don't need a board to tell me that.
Well, it's there to provide pressure on policymakers to demonstrate that this hasn't been successfully addressed. And I think the evidence does show whenever you have that level of transparency, it does lead to better policy making. And so we're trying to help suggest a way to close that feedback.
No, I understand having a board when you're doing something, but when you're not doing anything, I don't understand what the point of that is. You know, the implementation surely should be that we actually do something first. Well, and then you bring a board.
It demonstrates where the weaknesses are and how that changes over time as well.
No problem. Cheers, thank you.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Dr. Jordan, for your piece of work. It was very useful, and I suppose just to follow on from David's point, look, I think in Northern Ireland, most people have grappled with the reality that, unfortunately, politically, it can be unstable. That's the nature, actually, of a 4-party or a 5-party executive, for that matter. I think that we have to, work within the structures that we have. So we have to almost get beyond the reality that, in Northern Ireland we are in a society where, we have to work with the various politics. And we see that even within, for example, the Department for the Economy, because the Minister will use her role in a particular way that will meet, obviously, her policy objectives. We see that with the Good Jobs Bill, for example, and many of us have concerns about that, but at the same time we have to work it within the reality of the political institutions that we have. For me, just to follow on David's point around the Productivity Board, even looking at and I appreciate it's only suggested membership, but if you look at the membership, you have a representative suggested from the Department for the Economy, but the other departments wouldn't be represented. I know you're suggesting DFM should sign off on some of the stuff. I don't know what the exact wording was. It was something around, they should report back to the DFM. But again, you've committees there, communities, education. We've heard of the issue around skills. So how would a growth board actually join things up and improve that sort of silo in policy making that you have suggested?
So I think one of the key aspects of it would be to bring those stakeholders together, not so much in necessarily a formal aspect like the membership of the board, but hearing evidence from them as to what the issues are, but in the context of the Productivity and Growth Board undertaking its analysis of the productivity problem. It is just a suggested membership of that board. The reason why we focus specifically on the Department for the Economy is because it comes through in our analysis that they are very interlinked with nearly all of the policy challenges, so they have an important role to play. But we see that board as coordinating rather than dictating. And therefore it's there to provide some kind of framework to address this policy challenge.
Yeah, and of course with that board funding will be required, and that opens up the question as to where exactly that would come from. But I think that I'm not convinced in terms of the silo mentality. Certainly the time that I've been involved in politics, I've been listening to that now for the past 15 years in terms of departments, and it doesn't seem to be improving. Certainly through a committee perspective, we're doing our best to try and join up with other committees to almost bring some of these issues together. In terms of the data, you used the phrase analytical independence, and I suppose it's very difficult to address some of the challenges without the relevant data, notwithstanding David's point that a lot of research has been done. How do you suggest then that we go about getting that analytical independence, and what benefits would that bring to addressing some of the challenges?
The analytical independence in this context is particularly around the Productivity and Growth Board having the ability to independently set its trajectory and what analysis it undertakes. And therefore it's free to look at whatever issues it wants to look at within its overall guidelines. But the key aspect of that is how do we best make use of the data we have, and also think about what other data we might need. So one of the things we look at in the report are the potential issues around data that we have now. And this isn't to say that we're doing a bad job with data, it's more how could we improve the provision, particularly at that point of intersection between NISRA and ONS. And it's one of the issues we have, for example, with productivity data. We get those productivity numbers whenever they're published by ONS for UK regions. But of course, if you're Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, you have a devolved government, which probably could benefit from having that a bit earlier. And there are also measures we'd like to have, we simply don't have. So for example, we don't have any measure of capital in the economy, so the level of physical assets in the economy. And therefore, whenever we talk about productivity at the moment, we're specifically talking about labour productivity. But the best measure of productivity in the economy is total factor productivity. And for that, you need a measure of capital levels in the economy. So unless we have things like that, then yes, we maybe are making our best educated, not guess, but judgment as to what the issues are. And so you need that data capacity there to support the analysis. And I think one of the key things we would recommend from this report is looking at how NISRA is resourced for particularly areas where currently it isn't able to produce something because it doesn't have the resource there to take on further collection of data.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Dr. Jordan.
Gary, thank you. Dr. Jordan, can I thank you on behalf of the committee? You have an important task to do in cajoling the department to really get a glimpse of this, so we wish you well and we look forward to staying in contact with you on this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Chair, is the committee content to write to the department just asking what action it is to take in respect of this report, particularly around the development of data, including capital measures in the economy, and the establishment or otherwise of the Productivity and Growth Board?
Members content?
Yep.
Okay. Move then on to item 9, members delegated legislation, freight container safety, and I'll refer members to page 281 of the meeting pack. The department proposes to lay a statutory rule entitled the Freight Container Safety Convention Regulations Order Northern Ireland 2025. The rule is subject to negative resolution procedure in the Assembly, and the rule will come into operation on the 9th of June. The proposed rule is described as updating and modernising the freight container safety approval regime established in Northern Ireland in 1992 and implementing United Kingdom obligations under the International Convention for Safe Containers 1972, which was introduced by the International Maritime Organisation. The changes include additional information on safety approval plates, changes to exemption and testing programmes, the conspicuous marking of containers with limited stacking or racking capacity, and guidance for authorised control officers to assess the structural integrity of containers. The changes have been in effect in other parts of the United Kingdom since 2017. The cost of Northern Ireland businesses, if any, as most are likely to be compliant, is estimated at around £40,000 in total, and mostly relates to SAPs and conspicuous marking changes. The department undertook a consultation on the issue in 2017 with limited commentary. The department has not explained why the Northern Ireland regulations were delayed compared to the rest of the United Kingdom. It appears that DFE was waiting for the Health and Safety Executive in Great Britain to undertake a review of the equivalent regulations in GB. A further review will follow in 2027. Members have any questions or concerns in relation to this? Jonathan?
So, broadcasting, can you unmute Jonathan, please? Just have another. There you go.
Hello, Chair, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sure, just nothing in line with what you said, but could we perhaps maybe probe with the department what was the delay? I know it hasn't been alluded, it's been alluded to what it may be, but we don't really have a firm opinion on why that was.
Chairperson.
Okay.
Yep. Otherwise,
But otherwise, is the committee content for the department to make the rule?
Yeah.
Okay. Super. Move then to item 10, correspondence, members, which start at page 293 of our meeting packs. Item 2 at page 296, members are asked to note the departmental response in respect of the offshore renewable energy consultation. Is the committee content to note pending the post-consultation briefing? Great. Item 3, members, is again for noting on a departmental response on miscarriage leave. That the consultation is to be published before the summer recess. Are members content to note? Thank you. Item 4, members are asked to note correspondence from the department in relation to the Game of Thrones studio tour issues that the committee raised. Members content. Jonathan. To note, Jonathan.
Sure. No, it's thanks for the committee to write for that, and I have read the response. I suppose one thing that is still alluding is we did ask for a breakdown from Tourism NI and indeed from the wider sort of Department of Economy. Its breakdown between support for projects in which it helped establish in comparison to those private operators, and I would like to see a breakdown of that.
Right to the department of those terms. So
members agreed?
Yep.
Okay. Item 5, members are asked to note correspondence from the department in relation to the forthcoming review of HE. Members content to note? Yep. Item 6, members are asked to note the departmental correspondence in respect of the Minister's new tariff mitigation working group, terms of reference, membership and summary of current position. Members content to note at this stage, and maybe at some stage we will invite the working group to brief the committee. Great. Okay. Item 7, members are asked to know the departmental response in respect of the delayed renewable energy support scheme on contracts for difference. Are we content to know pending a briefing later this month? Yeah. Item 8, members are asked to note a response from the Minister for Migration. Members content to note? Okay. Item 9, members are asked to note the ISNI Capital Investment Activity Report. Content? Thank you. Item 10 at page 28, members are asked to note the response from the Windsor Framework Democratic Scrutiny Committee, which confirms that it is not to scrutinise EU regulation in respect of vehicle emissions. The committee may wish to take related evidence on this issue. Mr. Buckley?
Yeah, no, I would agree that we take further evidence from the dealers, given that there was a piece of engagement with them and the Secretary of State, and they did highlight serious concerns. So I think, given that there's no other committee that is able to take this up, I think we should at least afford them the opportunity to give evidence to the committee.
Members content?
Yeah.
Thank you. Item 11 then, members are asked to note information from the Department of Finance in relation to the spending outturns. Members content? Thank you. Item 12, members are asked to note a copy of correspondence to the department from the Committee for Agriculture. Members content to note?
Yeah.
Thank you. Members are asked to consider an invitation to the CAFRE panel discussion at Balmoral Show. Will members who are attending Balmoral let the committee clerk know? Members content? Okay. Item 14, members are asked to note a copy of the Examiner for Statutory Rules latest report, and she advises that SR 2532, the Education Support etc. Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland, which the committee considered on the 25th of February, had a fairly significant drafting error. A revised rule will be required in order to revoke the erroneous provisions. Is the committee content to note? Okay. Item 15, members are asked to note a copy of correspondence in relation to the Product Regulation and Metrology Bill from the House of Lords Northern Ireland Scrutiny Committee. We'll obviously come on to that further later in the agenda. Members content to note at this stage?
Yep.
Okay. Item 16, members are asked to consider an invitation to a meeting of the Border Region Manufacturing Cluster with the Minister for the Economy at 1 p.m. on the 3rd of June 2025. Are members content to accept and advise the clerk if they're going to attend? Okay. Item 17, then if we move to table item, members are asked to consider a memo from the department advising of the granting of mineral prospecting licenses. Members content to note? Yeah, okay. Item 18, members and 19, members are asked to know copies of the North-South Ministerial statements made by the Minister in the House yesterday. Members content to note both? Thank you. Item 20, then, members are asked to consider a copy of the Legislative Consent Memorandum on the Product Regulation and Metrology Bill. Are members content that the committee takes related evidence on this next week?
So members, to explain, the legislative consent motion has now been laid, so there will be a debate in the Assembly. The committee took evidence on this on the 29th of January, At that point, members could not come to a decision about it because not that much information had been provided. So the Minister now appears to be content for the legislation to apply to Northern Ireland. So it's, as the committee will be obliged to produce a report, the idea is officials will come along and explain exactly why the Minister is now happy and why the committee should be happy too or not. So we can do that next week if members are happy.
Members content? Okay. Item 21, members are asked to consider a response from the Minister on the 25-26 budget. So there is some additional allocation that's been made in relation to the department's overall draft budget. I think it's 14 million, 9 of which has been ring fenced for skills, and then 5 for general allocation within Dell spending. So the vast majority of that has gone to the higher education line on the report, but there's no breakdown in terms of how that's spread across the institutions. Given that it's resource and not capital spending, I assume it's all gone to the teaching grant, because if I recall, the way in which the capital or the research grant is done through capital spending, so it'll have to be done through the teaching grant. But it'd be useful just to try and get a breakdown of that 4 million in terms of what institutions it's going to, but also what it's to be allocated to. If members are content to do that, we'll get, and then if the members are content that we get evidence on this on the 28th of May. Yep. Okay, thank you. Are there any other issues, members, on the correspondence? If not, forward work plan. Peter?
So members, as indicated on the 14th, if I get this right now, yeah, the 14th of May. Okay, so what we'll have to do, unfortunately, is start at 9:30. We'll get a briefing from the department on the product regulation and metrology bill, because we'll need that in order for me to draft the report. Then at 10 o'clock, we've got the Assembly Research just telling us about the employment bill, comparing Northern Ireland with GB, so that will give you the context for the Minister's anticipated bill. Then after that, a bit of an epic session then with the joint concurrent meeting with Education. So we'll be in the Senate that day for the whole bit. So we'll have our normal economy meeting. That will start at 9:30, finish at 10:30. Then we go into the joint concurrent. So Education will join us. Mr. Matheson will chair. We will hopefully hear from officials from Education and Economy about careers. I would really hope they're going to tell us quite a lot about careers, because it's been a year since the committee heard about this. Members would also ask for feedback on compulsory school age changes, SEA regulation. I know the Education Committee are interested in SEN and post-19 SEN at that, so we may hear a bit about that. So that could turn into quite a long session. Members can attend remotely if they so desire, but even though when you come in you might see a lot of members sitting around the table, please remember we need 2 quora, so we need us to stay until the bitter end, which might be about 1:30 at a guess. So that might split into 2 briefings, but that'll be that. So that's next week. On the 21st, we're in Studio Ulster, which is fine. 28th of May, again, an early start at 9:30 in order to fit in the departmental briefing on the budget, because the budget number 2, no, is it budget number 2? It is. Budget number 2 bill will come on the 3rd of June, so that'll be our last opportunity to get a briefing on that. Additionally, on the 28th of May, we have another joint concurrent, this time with our colleagues in the ERA committee. This is just going to be DERA and the department. But Ofcom had written to this committee, and told them a few things about telecommunications. So it's suggested that they be included in that briefing too, and they're happy enough to do that, and so is the department. So this is all about telecommunications, rural areas. I mean, I would guess it's a bit of an economic game changer to have 300, 400 megabyte connections in rural areas. So it's kind of about that, the impact of stratum and gigabit, etc. So members are happy with that. Then additionally, we talked last week about briefing in Enniskillen and another one in Foyle. Tourism Ireland will now attend both of those, so all good. And then on the 11th of June, I think the plan is, we haven't quite confirmed this with Queen's yet, but we expect to be there. The Chief Scientific and Technology Advisor has confirmed that she will come along on the 11th of June. So she is basically the executive's advisor on science stuff, and so she can tell us quite a bit about AI And what we're also trying to do that afternoon is have a nice visit to Queen's, all about so you can see some AI and what that actually means. And then, so that will take us up nearly to summer recess. So I'm thinking, having taken some feedback from members, is that our first meeting after summer recess will not be on the 3rd of September, but will in fact be the week after, which would be the 10th of September. So that would be our first meeting. So we'll do our correspondence and look at our strategic plan then. Just to advise those members that are on Windsor Framework Democratic Scrutiny Committee, I think you're going to be here on the 4th of September, but anyway, that's your problem, so we will not. So we will be here on the 10th if members are content with that. Great, lovely.
Okay, move to any other business. Just a couple of other raised members. Firstly, are members content that we as a committee write formally, particularly to the young students who produced the food for us last week, just to thank them and wish them well for their students? Yeah. Okay. Secondly, Balmoral show next Thursday. Members, those attending, keep to let Peter know, and we'll make arrangements for that. Members may have read on the news following our recent visit to the Deluxe Group that they've been awarded the King's Award for Export. I'm not saying that we had everything to do with that, but are the committee content that we write formally to them, congratulating them on that? And then the last one I just wanted to raise, I see on the Department for Finance website that the cost of doing business survey has landed without any fanfare or press. So it may be useful at some stage for us to try and have a look at that. That was lauded as the great solution to the national insurance increases and the cost, the piece of research. So though it doesn't seem to have been as well covered as it was talked about at the time that it was going to be launched, so it might be useful.
The department has actually sent that to all committees, so we just received it about yesterday, so we'll have it in correspondence next week, and then members can elect to take it.
Jonathan?
No, I was not sure. It was just to indicate, Peter, that I would be attending Balmoral.
Oh, perfect. No problem at all. Does any member have any other business they wish to raise at this stage? If not, can I thank you for your attendance, and we will be back in the Senate chamber next
9:30
week at 9:30. Committee now adjourned.
Committee Room 30, sound. 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 Committee Room 30, sound.